Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest Urban Living News webinar. Today, we are going to be discussing the future of co-living. It's a fascinating sector, and I think it's an asset class that is just coming into its own. So we've got a really good conversation ahead of us. My name is George Sell. I'm editor of Urban Living News, and we are a multimedia platform for the hospitality and real estate sectors focusing on urban development. The webinar is going to last an hour. If you've got any questions, please do submit them using the chat or the Q&A functions in Zoom. We'll either get onto them at the time or we'll put 5 or 10 minutes aside at the end to get around to them. And a recording of the session will be sent via email to everybody who is registered. Now, our Urban Living webinar strand is sponsored by IMS, and we are just going to watch a short video to find out more about them. Okay, thanks to IMS for sponsoring. If you look in the chat, you can see their contact details, so do get in touch and find out more. So we've got a fantastic panel today. I'm going to ask the guys to introduce themselves one by one, and we'll also be posting their LinkedIn profiles in the chat as well, so you can make contact there. We'll go from left to right as we see them on the screen. So Matt, would you like to kick off, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, George, for the invitation. I'm Matt Lesniak, co-founder and head of impact innovation at Conscious Coliving, and we are a shared living consultancy and research platform. And we empower the people and businesses driving the global shared living movement through research-based content, education, and consulting. And yeah, you can head to our website and find a variety of handbooks, blog posts, podcast series, our recent podcast series, Co-Living Conversations, and more shared living resources there.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Tom, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, George. Thanks for having us on the call today. My name is Tom Manwell. I'm the founder and director of Wellstudio Architecture and Wellstudio Co-Living. We're a global architecture firm that helps clients design co-living buildings and provides advice and consultancy on co-living spatial design. Really excited to be on the call today. Do come and visit our website, wellstudiocoliving.com. I'll put it in a link in the chat, and you can see all of our projects there and the kind of specialism that we have in co-living design.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And Mariya, welcome to you.
Hi, thanks for having me, George. Excited to be here and talk about co-living. That has been a sector that has been on my personal agenda for a few years now. So glad to see the momentum finally coming. I'm part of NREP, which is the largest Nordic and one of the largest Northern European investment managers. We focus on doing real estate through a sustainable way, and we have our own internal operating platforms across various different living sectors, including co-living. And most recently, I was involved with our entrance into the German market with the co-living joint venture together with Artisa Group. So I'll pass on to Joris.
Yeah,
Thanks, Mariya. Joris,
thanks,
good
Mariya.
afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks, George, also for hosting and having me here. Yeah, my name is Joris. I'm working as a business development manager for the Artisa Group. We are a Swiss real estate developer with offices outside of Switzerland in Germany, Netherlands, Italy, France, and Czech Republic. And in all these countries, we have a common goal together with NREP, and that's developing our micro-living, co-living concept called CityPop. And then personally, I'm supporting the team in the expansion in mainly Germany and the Netherlands at the moment, and support on the investment and finance side. And I do that with together with Mariya.
Excellent. Thank you, Joris. So before we get stuck into the conversation, I just want to show a few slides. These are mainly screen grabs from news stories that we've run on our Urban Living news site, just to give the conversation a bit of background and to give you an idea of some of the things we're going to be discussing. So the investment side is quite interesting. You've got a wide range of money coming in. It's traditionally been more on the VC side, but now we're seeing some institutional investors. We still see the Cohabs deal there, and we've got players such as Ares who are betting big on co-living. They've got two quite big co-living ventures going on, and then you've got people like Draper, the Silicon Valley VC, back in a co-living scheme, which is quite an interesting one. Not everything in the garden has been rosy. There are some issues the sector is facing, particularly on the planning side. In Ireland, there's a de facto ban on any new co-living planning consents. In the UK, I think it's safe to say there's confusion and there's no one uniform approach to co-living. In Liverpool, co-living comes under residential planning guidelines, which means there's a minimum space standard, which really makes most co-living schemes unviable. Things are starting to happen in London. The new London plan is got a bit more coherence about it. And then we obviously had the fairly high profile administration of the Collective, who were one of the innovators in the space, and you know, that has left a bit of a legacy, but in a good and a bad way. We had a co-living event last week, and it was amazing the number of people there who worked at the Collective who have now gone on to do other really good and interesting things in the space. And finally, just some kind of interesting things that are happening around the world. We've recently seen Habit and Common merging to form the largest global co-living operator now. Habit European-based, Common mainly in the Americas, so that's a truly global company now. We've got smaller independent players like Gravity raising money to expand. And we're also starting to see some quite interesting conversations of conversions of assets. So the Hudson Hotel in New York, which was quite a high profile kind of boutique lifestyle hotel, it is being converted into a co-living asset. So, oh, and one more slide. Yeah, I forgot about that. This is just to show the sort of variety of the schemes going on. You know, there are co-living assets that have as little as 10 or 12 units, and then this one in Manchester has got 2,200 rooms, one in the planning. And we're also seeing local authorities who have been a bit wary of the co-living concept now starting to look seriously at it as rental affordability issues, and Miami, a very recent case in point there. So let's get on with our conversation, and I want to start on the investment and finance side. We're still talking about a pretty nascent sector here. Mariya, can you just give us a kind of sketch of how mature co-living is as an investment asset class, where it is on the journey and where you think it's likely to go?
Of course. So I'll use a very easy comparison with student housing because it's an adjacent sector that has definitely matured a lot more over the last 10 years. So currently we have about 95,000 beds across Europe in co-living. Estimates are extremely difficult because, as you know, it's hard to define what exactly is co-living. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt. But let's say 95,000 beds in Europe. That's what JLL and ULI think with their recent report, of which 70,000 are in development. So about 75% of the total stock is being developed. So it's not there yet. In comparison, student housing has 810,000 beds across Europe, according to Bonart. And of those, only 11% or 92,000 are being developed. So you can just see the sheer scale of student housing. It's more than 10 times bigger than co-living currently is. And also you can see that it's matured a lot more. So you have a lot more operational stock than co-living does. If you look at the addressable market of those two sectors, student housing, let's say it covers 3 years of your life when you're a student, versus co-living, if you just take the prime customer, 25 to 35-year-old, the young professional, that's already 10 years of your life. So it's a much bigger addressable market. And in reality, co-living also captures other customers, such as students themselves live in co-living asset classes, short stay, depending on the use class and the country that you're in. You can capture some of the short stays customers, changing life situations. We've seen a lot of people go to co-living developments when they're getting a divorce or they're having a house renovation. So it's a much larger market, and yet it's a lot smaller than student housing. So we think personally that until 2030, you'll see the market at least triple, and that's assuming a very conservative penetration rate. So student housing, in theory, it has a high penetration rate because you want to be close to fellow students. But whatever penetration rate you assume for co-living, you can see that there is a huge potential for that space to grow over the next 10 years. So really excited to see it being institutionalized, because at the moment it's not there yet.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the student housing sector is seeing a massive supply and demand imbalance. You know, there's even that sector, there's nowhere near enough of it, but co-living has the potential to go on and be even bigger if it can iron out the issues that it's facing. So it's exciting times.
Indeed.
Joris, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so definitely I would love to speak a little bit, about the Dutch and the German market, to make these examples Mariya was just telling more concrete. And I think the most important thing, besides the definition and how to categorize co-living and how to define it properly, I think also the current market situation we're facing, that today a lot of construction projects are on hold. All major cities across Europe, but Germany and Netherlands, the A cities, are facing large deficits, increasing housing shortages. And also, if you look at how the household structure is changing, that by probably 2030, we're looking at over 50% of single household persons. That's going to increase the demand to products like ours significantly. Yeah.
Thanks, Joris. Matt, you've got quite a broad overview of the market. Where do you see the sector in its kind of journey to becoming a mature investment class?
I mean, you guys touched on a lot of the big points in your intro as well, George, about a lot of these institutional investors getting into the sector, seeing these kind of joint venture projects with cohabs and just a lot of other kind of bigger institutional players interested in co-living and creating co-living specific funds. DTZ Investors is another example with their co-live fund, and all of the which were the ex collective assets, now run by other propco and opcos. But those are great indicators. Mariya shared the most relevant and recent data quite well with ULI and JLL. So not much more to add. Just I guess one interesting factor with co-living is also its like ESG and social value potentials, and then also bringing in the potential of other forms of investment. So green investment, social investments, impact investments into not only real estate, but residential real estate, co-living, and the social hub, for example, this hybrid short stay, long stay model, formerly the student hotel, they've gotten in the last few years quite hefty, quite big social investments for different green criteria and different social criteria as well. So I think that's another big potential for the co-living sector in terms of the investment potential.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Mariya, are we still at the stage where it's mainly the more kind of progressive and forward-thinking investors who are involved, and the bulk of them are still happier with the safety that asset classes they understand a bit better, or do you think that co-living is now broadly accepted?
We're definitely still in the early phases, and I think partially I've tried to explain in my head why that's the case, and I think it's a little bit bad timing as well. As it was being created as a sector, COVID hit, which didn't impact the operational assets, but clearly was one of the main reasons why the collective failed. Obviously, that created bad publicity. Planning is another issue. It's complicated to get planning in certain countries. Certain countries are easier. The operational aspects and people having the right operational setup to run co-living projects is another big hurdle. That's why you see, for example, the natural move of student housing platforms into the space, like the student hotel, which rebranded itself into the social hub. You see that also with International Campus, and they have now a co-living brand called Havens in addition to the Fizz. You see that with the likes of I Live, which was historically more student housing, and now have also a hotel concept or service apartment concept. Rioja. So you see that in a lot of different players trying to enter the space, because it's very clear that the supply demand imbalance in the space is definitely a good argument for growing the space, but it is not an easy space from a delivery perspective, and I think that's what has been the hurdle recently. And my concern is that given the current macroeconomic environment, whilst all of the living asset classes have a great tailwinds behind them, still will hinder yet again the growth and the speed of growth in co-living. And it is one of those sectors similar to student housing where you want to have scale to be more efficient, to also be able to sell your product across different markets. So hopefully that will be as a bit slower, but still steady progress into the space. So that's our view.
Yeah, if the headwinds are as strong as the tailwinds, then you're kind of left static for a while, aren't you? But that's a situation we'll have to get through. Joris, when you're looking for investment partners and you describe the kind of co-living element of City Pop, do they get it? Do they understand it? Obviously, Mariya did, but when you're speaking with
yeah, exactly. So NREP did very well, of course. Yes, I think they understand it. I think also, and that may be one thing to add on what Mariya said, is after COVID, it seemed that the traditional service apartments seemed not to be as bulletproof as everyone thought, and that accelerated also the interest into co-living, right? On top of everything she said about student housing, the supply and demand imbalances. So yeah, the way we position ourselves, maybe very quick, is we position ourselves in the middle of everything. That makes us, I think, unique. We target the average, length of stay of about 6 to 9 months, minimum stay 1 month, and maximum stay 12 months. And also, if you look at our tenant base, and that's probably the main key criteria on what differentiates ourselves is our tenants are coming from everywhere. So we have students, we have young professionals, we have commuters, we have smart seniors. So we're already touching, you know, partially, potentially a future concept of senior co-living. And we position ourselves more as a resi product. And that makes it easier to understand.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Okay, well, let's go on and talk about some of the difficulties in delivering new products at the moment. I mean, most of the issues I think will be common to all asset classes. But Tom, from an architect's point of view, when you're working with clients looking to bring new inventory on stream now, what are the main issues that they're facing at the moment?
Sure, thanks, George. I mean, really, it's about finding the right building in a city that they can develop and convert into co-living, or a site that works and is in the right location for the co-living target market. So things like the PTAL rating, the transport accessibility rating of the site, that it has. If it's an existing building, that it basically can be converted to co-living quite easily, and you don't need to kind of remove too many load-bearing walls and that kind of thing, which increases construction cost, and also that it can get planning permission, because as you've mentioned previously, different cities around the world have different kind of approaches to co-living. Sometimes it does require quite an onerous planning application, with quite a lot of arguments to be made in favor of the proposal for it to be co-living. So getting through the planning hoops, jumping through those hoops successfully, and then actually being in the right location for co-living, for it to make sense as a financial proposition, are a few of the things that challenge developers.
Are there any particular types of building which lend themselves particularly well to a conversion? I mean, we're going to see a lot of office space up for reuse and retail premises as well, I think. So are there any types of building which are particularly good for co-living conversions, and any that you particularly should avoid?
Sure, good question. I mean, offices can work quite well as conversion to co-living if they've got the right floor plates. If they have too deep floor plates, it probably wouldn't work so well. But if you've got enough windows basically on the external facades to make the bedrooms work, then offices can be quite good, because they can be on arranged on column grids, which can work quite well for creating studio bedrooms. A lot of the smaller boutique co-living operators do work with historical buildings, or buildings that are fairly old. They can work quite well. It's really a case of getting an architect such as ourselves involved to look at carrying out a feasibility study for the building, and working out how you can fit bedrooms or studio rooms into the existing structure of the building. So they can work well, and then other residential accommodation can work quite well as well. If you get apartments that you can convert into clusters of co-living bedrooms or studios, that can also work. Yeah, I mean, you'd probably want to avoid listed buildings can be really tricky, because you'll need permission to do many of the structural changes you might need to convert to co-living. So anything that's listed, or I mean, not to say you can't do it, but it's just you want to really consider quite carefully whether you go down that route. Yeah, and obviously other kinds of buildings that have nothing to do with living accommodation, don't have the existing infrastructure in terms of bathrooms. You know, putting new bathrooms in, you need a lot of new pipe work. That can all get quite tricky if you've got the wrong building type and getting services and things in there. So those are a few of the considerations.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tom. Joris, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah. So we also did in the past some office conversions, and without going too much into the details, what is also very interesting is from a planning perspective. So if you speak to cities, municipalities, and governments about a co-living concept, by converting an empty building, this also supports at least we have experienced that this definitely supports also the planning side. And like in all major cities, there in some areas you have large chunks of vacant offices. And this is definitely something we should look at, and also give assets a second chance, a second life, because of that. So that's maybe from a planning perspective also something we focus on.
Yeah, thanks, Joris.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as you know, local authorities tend to have very special view on co-living. Another point is that a lot of the office buildings tend to be located in commercial areas which are not fit for family housing typically. So local authorities tend to have a more positive view because it's still a living concept. So it provides housing, but it doesn't take away from the family housing, which they seem to be very focused on across Europe.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with planning for a bit, because I think one of the very first urban living webinars we did, we had a co-living operator on, and he was looking at 2 potential projects in London, and they were on either side of the same road, but they were in different boroughs. And the very fact that they were in different boroughs, even though they were, you know, only a few yards away from each other, made one potentially viable and one absolutely not viable, because that particular local authority was not keen on the concept. Mariya, in a kind of broad sense, do you think we're moving on? Do you think local authorities and municipalities are starting to get it now?
So I think that's a very UK, and I would even say London specific issue. The rest of Europe is ahead of the curve when it comes to planning, to be honest. And that's why, yes, we have a big pipeline in London, because that's where the sector kind of evolved or defined itself in the purest sense. But in reality, there are a lot of schemes that are reinventing themselves across Europe, because the planning situation is a lot easier, I would say. So, or there are less discussions with planners and just more defined zoning rules. So I don't know. I mean, I thought that when the GLA came up with the plan with the special use class on co-living, we were moving towards unified view on what co-living is and how to define it, and it will create bigger supply. So I think it's generally positive from what I hear. And again, I haven't spent my recent years doing co-living developments in London, is that it's quite punitive still in terms of the requirements for shared amenities and other criteria that they try to apply. So I think there are still some challenges. I think in general in the UK, the planning system needs to create better definitions, and from an investor standpoint, as long as you can underwrite something, then it's okay, and you will start seeing supply. I think uncertainty is what drives investors away, and that's why in the UK you tend to have quite a big spread of no real institutional capital yet, other than DTZ on forward funding basis, rather than taking any part of the planning process. It's quite a risky game to be involved in planning in the UK. But the rest of Europe is a lot easier, to be honest. What we're seeing is that a lot of, let's take the Netherlands as an example, they changed their points system recently. So a lot of resi developments that Joris can talk about, he's Dutch, so he knows a lot more details, but a lot of resi developments have stalled because of the changes in the planning system. So we have other issues in Europe, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But as long as you can have a productive conversation with the local authorities, and if you can also showcase previous experience, I think it unlocks a lot of opportunities. So that's where I think having a good brand and good track record will create the winners in Europe, because it helps you unlock opportunities that others might not be able to.
Yeah, thanks, Mariya. Tom, as somebody who presumably deals with the planners on a fairly regular basis, are you seeing movement in the right direction?
Thanks, George. Yeah, I mean, gradually. I think as has been mentioned, in the UK, there are various different local authorities and different municipalities that have different approaches and feelings towards co-living as a proposal. So it is a case of looking at the local planning policies and investigating that area to specifically be able to see what their approach is and how best to get co-living development through planning, as there are different routes you can theoretically take. But yeah, gradually I think it's becoming more well known as a asset class, and therefore over time I think it will become easier to get planning. I'm talking about the UK specifically when I'm saying all of these things. I think Mariya's quite right. In other countries, I think they are further ahead of the curve in other European countries. But I think, in general, basically, for instance, in the London plan, they've got the H16 policy in the London plan now, which is for large-scale, purpose-built, multifamily living, which kind of has a whole framework for that, specifically for larger, basically co-living type of proposals. So those policies are gradually catching up, and I think that's also happening globally. So yes is the answer, but slowly.
I think one of the initial concerns a lot of planners had was room size, and some developments, including some at the Collective, were kind of pushing the envelope a bit on how small they could go, like 15 square meters. Do you think that there's a general upward trend in room size?
Yes, I think there is. I think there have been a few examples of co-living which has had quite small room sizes, and it's been considered that the kind of that offset of shared space which is available to residents that would theoretically offset the sort of loss of amenity of a smaller room wasn't kind of being fulfilled. Maybe, for instance, some case of co-living building in Dublin, which is quite well publicized. But so they're always against sort of like shady developers cramming hundreds of people into a small building to just make maximum profits and not providing them with well-being, good well-being, which is something that we at Wellstudio really know about and integrate into our co-living building designs. But yeah, room sizes generally in the market have increased, I think, and that there's really now the standard is that you have a kitchenette, a bathroom and a bedroom space all kind of integrated into a slightly larger studio room, and that seems to work very well for the majority of the residents, and then you augment that with other shared spaces. But we've studied a lot of really good examples of studio rooms, and we know what really works. And it doesn't have to be huge, but it does have to be well designed.
Yeah, an extra square meter or two is not going to make a huge amount of difference if the room is poorly designed.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to that, based on also the conversation that we had last week at your event in London, it seems that 20 to 25 square meters is kind of the norm. But funny enough, our smallest rooms, and we see that across both our Nordic Living, Nolly Studios and City Pop, the smallest unit sizes, even of 18 to 20 square meters, tend to be the first ones to be let. So I think there is still the affordability aspect is quite important for the target customer. So pushing the boundary down to 12, which is, I think, the smallest room that the Collective has, is probably a step too far. So we've gone too far, and even themselves, when they were developing the product, they moved up the size. But I think if it's well designed, it could be 18 to 20 square meters and still have a desirable space for people to rent at a more affordable price point. For example, City Pop has beds that you can pull back in, and they become couches. So having a room that feels bigger. Also, the bathrooms we discussed, whether you can freely move around in the bathroom is another important element. So I think somewhere between 18 and 25 seems to be the optimal size, but it really heavily depends on sort of the city and the target customer that you have and how you've designed it.
Yeah, thanks, Mariya. Just one more question on planning. Joris, City Pop is quite an interesting concept because, as we said before the call started, you sit between hospitality and residential, really, with your minimum one month and maximum 12-month stay. That would probably melt the brains of some planners in the UK. How does that kind of in between sweet spot go down in the countries where you're working?
So far, very positive. So currently, we are developing in Berlin, in Frankfurt, and recently opened our first asset in Essen. But also to give the recent example where we are currently looking at projects in the Netherlands, in The Hague, the city is actually very in favor of co-living. What they don't prefer is to, depending of course on location, to add mixed uses to it. So if you plan a certain amount of square meters for office, maybe you even split between long stay and short stay to give additional audience towards the building. And in that sense, we're further developing also the neighborhood, you know, and amenities, shared spaces or can be used by other people as well. And that cities are very in favor of that.
Yeah, sure. Matt,
and also maybe one thing, sorry, to add what Mariya said is if you look at our apartments, you know, where the 18 square meters is rather already on the smaller side. Also, if you look at, for example, the bathrooms, which are bigger, we have enough space for closets, etc. But also the kitchen, you know, we don't have the small hospital, like the hotel minibar. We have a real proper fridge where you can store quite some stuff. So, and that gives more the living feeling, basically.
Yeah. On the subject of mixed use developments, Matt, what do you see as co-living's role within mixed use, and do you think we'll start to see more co-living provided in kind of multi-use buildings, multi-use developments?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some co-living operators inherently have that mixed use element to them, and they have some office, they have some commercial, F&B, restaurant space, event spaces open to the public as well. So some co-living operators are just like I said, inherently using that kind of mixed use model, and I think that's actually a big value add of the co-living model, and it's what makes it as well a kind of residential asset class which can be open to the public and have impact on the wider neighborhoods, and really integrate wider neighborhood groups and activities and group and organizations into the spaces. So I think that's definitely one of the interesting kinds of models. You need to have a certain scale for that as well. So not all co-living operators, if they're maybe the kind of smaller to medium size co-living spaces, they may not be able to have those spaces that are open to the public, or a restaurant or co-working. They may be just integrating into the wider neighborhood a bit differently and having event partnerships or partnerships with local businesses, local restaurants, local cafes, including those into their community apps for different discounts or different different kinds of B2C partnerships that are with local businesses. If the size is not really able to accommodate like bigger, larger co-working or event spaces, then there are other ways to have a kind of like mixed use model. But yeah, I also see some operators or some buildings in the US. There was one example which used to be Ollie, then it was Star City, now it's Common, but the Alta Plus, I believe, in Long Island City, where they had a certain ratio of co-living developments and then a certain ratio of also kind of normal rental units, and then also all the kind of mixed use elements that go with that as well. So I'm seeing a bit of that happening as well, where you're having a diversity of your portfolio even within one building.
And just to add to that, we firmly believe, and actually the Denmark in our home markets is one of the places where we've really utilized sort of urban scale developments, because we have the luxury of having different operating brands. for example, the UN Village, we have our student housing brand in addition to co-living. It's not operational yet, it's under development, but you can check it online, and also Julie Living, which is the traditional rental model. So it creates mixed communities, living communities, which is quite beneficial, but also can create synergies in operating those assets.
Yeah.
Even Nali has an element of short stay, long stay, and also mixed use elements.
Yeah, so Norley, our operational assets are in Finland, and they all run on hotel licenses. So they range. The range is from 1 day, literally, when I go there for a business trip, I stay at Norley, to 12 months plus. So it is quite a mixed use, and we do run our own F&B, which is open to the general public. So in that sense, yes, it is easier in those hotel-like assets to be more open to local community and create more events. It's more operational in its nature.
Mariya, I want to stay with you for a minute because we've had a question in from Jack Mellinger, who asked, how would you define the key differences between build to rent and co-living? And the point I want to try and tease out here is I think that there's a real potential to include both uses in the same building. A lot of build to rent, particularly in London, is becoming unaffordable for quite a large section of the intended audience now. You know, even fairly well paid young professionals are struggling to afford some of the more highly amenitized build to rent out there. And if you can offer a co-living product with smaller units in the same building at something like a 20% discounted rent, do you think that's something we're going to see more of?
Again, I think it highly depends on each market and where the real demand sits. I think indeed in London we've had a lot of BTR because of the high land values. We've had a lot of highly amenitized build to rent, which becomes very unaffordable for young professionals. I think having smaller units, of course, is one of the ways to tackle that. Do you need a 50 square meter 1-bedroom apartment, or can you live in a 20 to 25 square meter apartment, half of that? So I think that doesn't necessarily mean it's half of the rent though, because we actually, that's it's obviously more expensive to build dense co-living communities. So you do see an actual, and that's one of the investment sort of points to make, is that we do see about 20% premium on per square meter basis. But of course, it does create an overall more affordable solution because of the smaller unit sizes. And also in Finland, for example, we've done a comparison. If you include cleaning services and internet and sort of procuring all of those on your own versus having the efficiencies of scale to select certain services, that also creates, if you have a gym as well, having that, if you look at the overall rent that you pay combined with those services separately, it's a much more affordable solution. So it's a lifestyle choice in a way. Yeah. But for sure, the key difference is, I think the original question was, I think it's room sizes. That's one. It is length of stay. So usually having a more flexible length of stay, not a year minimum. And ease of letting those. So, for example, without having to pay deposits and all of the above, which in certain markets becomes quite problematic. And for sure, there is a bigger focus on community, but maybe depends on what rental you're looking at. So some of them have that element and have the element of amenities. So I wouldn't say that every BTR product has that difference with co-living. So I would say it's length of stay and its room size. These are the key differences.
Yeah. I know at the co-living event at MIPIM recently, I know Tom and Matt, you were there. Luca Bavani from Habit gave quite an interesting talk, and I think he was deliberately being quite provocative, but he said people talk too much about community and co-living, and what people really value the most is convenience. And you know, when they need to find somewhere to live quickly, when they don't want to go through an onerous referencing and deposit taking process. They want they want a length of stay that can be very flexible too. It was I think he was saying it deliberately to get a reaction, but it was interesting, and that that's seemed to be the way he's taking his business.
And Ricardo from Gravity has said the same thing. It's with the community is a plus, and I think it's an important element in tackling loneliness. But co-living is not the only answer to that. I think having a good operational model will provide the same answer, or could provide the same answer. I think, as you say, it's convenience and affordability as well.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on and talk a bit about awareness, both in terms of brands that are out there and how mature the sector is in terms of branding, and also whether we think the target audience actually knows what co-living is and is searching deliberately for co-living, or are they just looking for good, affordable accommodation? Matt, do you want to kick off and give us an overview on that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of branding, I think that co-living operators are quite brand savvy, and probably some of the most on the residential real estate sector, and the whole kind of like PRS sector. I think co-living operators definitely nail that down in terms of having savvy brand, very accessible brand, very tech savvy as well. So everything is quite easily done, either on their website or through other kinds of tech platforms that are usually integrated and white labeled with an app or a PMS system. So the whole kind of like user journey in terms of marketing, sales, and branding has been thought of quite well. And yeah, using a bit of like UX design theories and principles and other kind of more tech principles, I would say, and bringing that into real estate with like I said, these accessible, savvy and yeah, sometimes quirky, fun branding methods, and being on all the social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn for more like B2B investment or B2B partnerships. So I think co-living operators are definitely on the cutting edge with all of that. And yeah, you can kind of tell the difference sometimes between a new co-living startup and some of the more traditional built-to-rent players or other rental options. And in terms of whether the consumer base knows what co-living is, I think the consumer base is still in the same place that planners, investors, developers, and wider stakeholders are with co-living, where it's getting better and there's more understanding of the model, but it's still this looming question of what is co-living and how does it really differentiate from any other kind of service department model or other kind of like built to rent model. So I think as you guys are saying, a lot of consumers are coming in for that convenience factor, those flexible stays, yeah, the ease of getting into the building, and that like relative affordability because of all the cost savings and the all-in-one rent. I can't really consider it affordable living, but it's more about like a relative affordability and cost savings. And I think that they're coming in for that, but I also see a lot of testimonials and a lot of stats about retention and brand loyalty from co-living operators, where this saying of like people are coming for the convenience, but they're staying for the community, and they're staying for the experience, and they're staying for the connections that they made, and they're surpassing some of the expected lengths of stays of around like 9 to 12 months, and maybe making it 18, 24, 36 months instead of just 9 to 12. And I think that comes with the actual experience, the amenities, the services, and then all the more intangibles of the authentic relationships that they're making and lifelong friendships that they're making. So yeah, I think it's fair to say like one of the main mottos or taglines in co-living is come for convenience and stay for community. And I've seen it on a bunch of just examples of that on Gravity's website, on Nolly's website, of people saying, I came for the ease of living, but I'm staying for the experience and for the community and for the friendships. So
yeah, we went out probably a couple of years ago now to central London and did some vox pop videos of people who we thought looked as if they would be the right demographic for co-living. We were quite near a lot of higher education premises and offices and so on. And we asked people, A, if they knew what co-living was, and B, if they could name any co-living brands. And the results were pretty uninspiring, to be frank. One person named The Collective, a couple of people had a rough idea. Do you think we'd get different results if we went out now, best part of a couple of years later?
Maybe. I think we're still trying to get there. But I think there is more and more awareness, and there's more and more press, and a lot of even like the UK based or other international based mainstream media, mainstream press. You see a lot more articles in Vice and New York Times. Sometimes they're not the best articles, but you're seeing that kind of visibility in mainstream press, and because of that, like tech savviness, that social media savviness, I'm sure that Instagram ads and Facebook ads are popping up everywhere as well for these target markets, and that they're seeing commercials or ads for Gravity or for Folk or for potentially Nolly or City Pop. So yeah, I think there's more visibility and more awareness, but I think like we as industry professionals kind of need to help with the definition of co-living and the awareness around co-living, and then that will end up diffusing into the wider market and into the consumer base.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Matt. I guess
probably it's an opportunity that we don't have the likes of WeWork yet dominating, because if you go and ask somebody what co-working is, obviously people will immediately associate that with WeWork. So
well, they tried, didn't they, to get into this space and shelved it.
They did, yeah. But actually, I think Adam Newman is trying to go back into the space. But I think that's an opportunity that for somebody to make a name and become a brand leader in the space. So let's see who becomes the next leader of the space over the next few years. But I think we just haven't had, the market is too fragmented at the moment to really be able to assume that the consumer will understand it.
It will be interesting to see what this Flow venture turns out to be, because he's keeping his cards quite close to his chest at the moment. Yeah, that could be a game changer. We're getting to near the end of our session, so I want to finish off by asking you each in turn what you think will be the most significant changes in the co-living sector over the next 5 years. And let's go from left to right as I see you in my little gallery there. So Joris, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see what we already discussed, and Matt said this, Matt is also, and we're all working on, is definition and classification in terms of the product, right? And again, you know, there are so many verticals within co-living or shared living, etc. So that's one. That, you know, there will be definitely also hopefully comparables between average length of stay, occupancies, common areas, what type of service you get, because it's exactly that point that people look at it and say, oh, that's super expensive, but do not yet fully understand what you get on top of it, with what is all included. And I think this is the message we need to bring. More understanding of investors. That's for sure. Probably you will also see in 5 years down the road some leading European brands, not as global as WeWork, but that we're going to see, and hopefully CityFop is going to be one of them. And probably better or more digitalization. We're going to see more digitalization on so more launches of apps, etc. That the whole experience and check-in, check-out, payments. We already do payments via credit card through the app directly, so you cannot book through our website, etc. So here you will also see more digitalization through the sector. Yeah, these are the things I think.
Great stuff. Thanks, Joris. Matt, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I think the industry will evolve with other trends happening worldwide, and other investment demands, employee demands, consumer demands, city planner and national level demands. And a lot of those are around sustainability and ESG and social value. So integrating those into the design and construction phases all the way through into operations and beyond, and really just having these conscious co-living models, if I may say, and that are embedding well-being, sustainability, and community into the core of their models, that are that are measuring and reporting on these things as well, that are also backed by investors, like I was saying earlier, that have this green or social mindset. And yeah, and I think employees and consumers will, and already are, gravitating to those kinds of brands, whether it's in real estate or whether it's Patagonia or other kinds of consumer sectors, you know. So I see that happening more and more with businesses in general, even outside of real estate. And I think real estate developers, operators need to also follow along that trend, or else there's different kinds of financial and human resource risks down the line. So
yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Matt. Tom, what about you?
Thanks, George. Yeah, I think there are probably 3 or 4 areas where co-living is going to evolve. I think one is scale, number of units. As someone mentioned earlier, I think we will see a massive growth in co-living, but also there will be a kind of a blurring of the boundaries of what co-living is, what build to rent is, and there will be more kind of some larger mass market companies coming into the market, such as we saw at Habit at the MIPIM Co-Live Summit, where they're looking at kind of really broad offering to the mass market appeal of kind of shared living, but it's not necessarily concentrating as much on community as some of the other co-living brands. And then at the same time, I think there will be a diversification actually into niche brands as well, and there'll be more niche brands of co-living that cater for certain demographics of people, certain types of people. For instance, some might emphasize well-being, some might emphasize convenience, and some might emphasize technology. Different kinds of buildings will be used as well that appeal to different types of age ranges, yeah, basically this evolution of buildings which actually have not only single kind of studio rooms in them, but also self-contained units for older age brackets, and build to rent units. So you might get some floors being build to rent units, some floors being individual bedrooms with shared kitchens, and then others which are studio rooms. So I think these kind of hybrid models will also evolve.
Thank you, Tom. And Mariya, last word to you.
Tough to add anything to all of these great points that everybody else made. I guess I think as we see more schemes being delivered, there will be more product to invest in, so investment volumes will increase. You'll start seeing portfolios and platforms being traded, which is something that will create scale in general and transparency in the market. So looking forward to seeing that.
Excellent. Thanks, Mariya, and thank you all for your contributions. Really good discussion today. Just going to show a few slides before we finish. And we're also going to leave the session open for an extra couple of minutes so you can take some notes from all the info in the chat. We have the next in our Urban Living Insights events on the 26th of April. And this is looking at the short-term rentals market. If you're interested in coming along to that, you can see a link to register in the chat. That will be hosted by my colleague, Paul Stevens. The Service Department Awards are taking place on the 18th of May in London. The judging period is underway now, and the shortlist will be announced in a couple of weeks. Again, the link to buy tickets for that is in the chat. And the next Urban Living webinar will be looking at the student housing market, which is in an interesting place at the moment. It has slightly different dynamics from co-living, but also a lot of similarities. and that is going to be on the 10th of May at 2 p.m. and you can register for that using the link in the chat. Finally, if you'd like to work with us at IHM across any of our digital offerings or our live events, please get in touch with one of my colleagues, Katie or Steph. You can see them on the screen there, and you can see their contact details in the chat. And thanks for watching. Thanks to Mariya, to Joris, to Matt, and to Tom for their great contributions. Thanks to you for giving up your time to join the webinar today. Enjoy the rest of your days. As I say, we'll leave the session open for 2 minutes so you can take some notes. And hopefully see you on the 10th of May for the next session, which is about student housing. Thanks, everybody, and bye-bye.